Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Genre Equality Podcast. I'm Hidzir,
I'm Isa.
and we have some big news for you this month. All our Genre Equality podcasts, meaning Behold and Genre Equality, will also be featured on Singapore Community Radio, run by our friends Darren Tan. I think Daniel Peters is there as well right
Yep,
now, doing his own podcast and kind of managing content as well.
yep.
We're very excited to be on that platform, but as for always, you can also find us on our Mixcloud and our Facebook /Genre Equality Podcast and Mixcloud /Genre Equality. Are you looking forward to being on SGCR from now on?
I'm excited. I don't really know what's in store. I think we carry on business as usual, but you just want to
Mm-hmm.
say hello to all the new people who happen to be catching us on Singapore Community Radio.
Yeah, apparently we'll be premiering on their Twitch channel. So if you want to catch it on Twitch, you can. If you want to catch our archives, if you can't make it live, for example, as always, tune into our Mixcloud. It'll always be there. Our topics and timestamps are in the comments.
Mhm.
If you just want to juggle around and only listen to us talk about the stuff that you like or dislike, or for example, Mulan is a big topic. It's something that we dislike, but hey, it might be an interesting listen for you guys. If you aren't aware, introduce yourself, Isa, a bit. Like, what do you do and stuff like that.
uh, wow. I think at the moment, right, the way the world is, genre equality stuff is basically the main thing that I'm doing right now. But
Mm-hmm.
on the side, yeah, I do a bit of writing. I do a bit of music stuff as well.
Yep.
But at the moment, my main kind of gig is being his like
Cool.
co-wing host thing.
Nice. Yeah. On the side as well. I mean, I'm writing a lot less these days. But I'm also a freelance journalist. I used to be a music journalist. Currently, I'm a film and television critic, which you can find. I think I'm writing for NME Asia right now, and I'm
Hmm.
writing for Popwire.
Hmm.
So if you are looking for something towards a more Southeast Asian regional bent, I'll be talking about Malaysian,
Yep.
Thailand, Indonesian, Filipino, Singaporean stuff over in NME Asia. And for a more international bent, you can check out my stuff on Popwire, lah,
Yep.
where I do various reviews and commentaries and recommendations on there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the Genre Equality channel. Basically we are a network of podcasts. We have several podcasts under our belt. Well, not several currently. We have two, but this is our flagship show where we talk about genre stuff. If you don't know what genre is, genre encompasses sci-fi, fantasy, and horror primarily, and a lot of animation as well. Which kind of blurs the boundaries between what is sci-fi and what is genre and what is not when it's animated.
Hmm.
But technically, we tend to accept anything animation as genre.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll hear us talk over the next few months about a lot of animation. And if you want to know when to tune in to us, we premiere the first of every month. It's a magazine type podcast where
Hmm.
we cover everything from the past 30 days, as in like this will be premiering on October 1st, so we'll be talking about all the titles that premiered in September. TV shows, films, podcasts, what else? Comics, graphic novels, books, anything of that sort that
Hmm.
is related to sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. You got it here, man. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about this September. Not as much as we usually talk about, but there's still plenty. Two big movies coming out
Yep.
this month. In Bill and Ted Face the Music, it is the third installment of the Bill and Ted franchise. Keanu Reeves and Alex Winters are back. We'll be talking about Disney's live-action adaptation of Mulan. We'll be talking about Ridley Scott's new operatic sci-fi series, Raised by Wolves, um, and a lot of other stuff. We'll be talking about Great Pretender, which is a new anime series on
Netflix.
Netflix, I
Yep.
believe. And I
Yep.
know Darren is a big fan of this. He actually pimped it on his own podcast on HCR, so we'll be talking about it again. And I'll be like, I'm all excited. Haikyuu is back on October 4th, which
Yeah.
is in a few days' time. I have not been watching Haikyuu throughout its run. I recently caught up maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I'm all about it. I'm excited for season 4 to come about. So we'll be talking about Haikyuu towards the end of the show. But first, I mean, let's begin with Bill and Ted Face the Music. It has been 31 years, from their excellent adventure, and 29 years since their bogus journey, which was the sequel. The air guitaring best friends of San Dimas finally return in Bill and Ted Face the Music. When we met Bill and Ted the last time, they were time traveling teenagers trying to pass history class and win the Battle of the Bands. Once prophesied to save the universe with their rock and roll, middle age and responsibilities and family have caught up with these two who have not yet fulfilled their destiny somehow. They've written thousands of tunes and they have yet to write a good one, much less the greatest song ever written, which will bring about world peace. So the fabric of time and space is tearing around them. A visitor from the future, the daughter of Rufus, played by Kristen Shaw,
Mhm.
warns our heroes that only their song can save life as we know it. Out of luck and out of inspiration, Bill and Ted set out for one last time travel adventure to seek out the song that will set the world right and bring harmony in the universe. This time, they're aided by their daughters, played by Samara Weaving and Brigitte Lundy Payne. If you a regular listener of Genre Equality, I've been talking a lot about how much I love Samara Weaving from the
Mhm.
film Ready or Not last year. Very good.
Mhm.
They're also accompanied by music legends like Louis Armstrong, Jimi Hendrix, Mozart, etc. Obviously, they're not the real people; they're
Yeah,
played
don't
by
forget Kid
actors.
Cudi.
Kid Cudi is there for some reason. Yeah, and so what do you think about Bill and Ted's race to save time and space through music and kind of the NUI of middle age that they're exploring here in Bill and Ted Face the Music?
Oh man, so silly. It's so silly, but at the same time, I think it's a rather good way to kind of wrap up everything.
Mm-hmm,
I do feel like it feels a tad too long to revisit this.
mm-hmm,
Just in terms of like the time gap in actuality as well as the time gap within the movie itself. It felt kind of strange in portions. I think it has to do with the fact that Keanu has done so much
mm,
since the first two movies, right? That
mm-hmm,
there are moments in time when you're looking at him on screen, right, and you kind of get lost in all the other characters that he's played,
mm-hmm,
just because of the his face, right? Like just that very kind of like stoic, kind of stoned face.
mm,
And sometimes that's a bit jarring. Like I can't really fully immerse in the fact that I'm watching Bill and Ted. It's like, oh, some portions is like John Wick on
mm-hmm,
screen, some portion is like Neo on screen. So there are points in time where it does feel a bit uh out of place, right? Just because they essentially play the same character despite the fact that they've aged so much.
mm-hmm,
And that's a bit weird. Yeah, and on the other hand, like Alex Winter hasn't done as much.
mm,
Or well, not done as much, but he hasn't done anything as big, I think, over the last couple of years.
mm,
And yeah, that's just a strange kind of like meta observation, I think, from the point of view of someone who has seen all of Keanu stuff, right?
mm,
And where he is in the current zeitgeist today as the son of this kind of hero in his own right.
mm-hmm,
It does feel a bit strange, but all in all, it definitely continues the same kind of tone, the same kind of vibe, the same kind of like beats even. And we revisit a lot of the beats from the first two movies as well.
mm-hmm,
And it's still incredibly enjoyable and incredibly silly. And it's a nice way to kind of wrap up, even though I think at the end, how they wrap it up was a bit of you could have projected it from the beginning, I think.
mm-hmm.
And it came as no surprise, but at the same time, it's kind of a very, it's okay, It was like it's cute, right? But it didn't really add to uh it didn't really resolve the story in the way that I think most people would think it would resolve the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right on that. And to your point earlier on, I do feel the same way when I watched Bad Boys for Life earlier this year in January. Much in the same way that like this is the white version of those two careers. Like Will Smith has gone on to do so much since the original Bad Boys,
Yep.
right? Whereas Martin Lawrence, similar to Alex Winter, hasn't really done
Yeah,
all
not
that
that
much.
much. Hmm.
I mean, like it's not like their careers are failures or anything. It's just relative to their co-star, different trajectory, like different levels.
Yep.
And it does feel like maybe Alex Winter needed this film more than Keanu Reeves, who is just doing it because it's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Bill and Ted has never been high art. The first two films were not high art, and I'm kind of glad that the third installment sticks to the dumb, goofy, sincerely sweet spirit of the franchise. Like it's silly and nonsensical. In ways that kind of inspired shows like Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if you felt any affection of Bill and Ted in the past, you feel it again here,
Absolutely.
because the movie rides on the same kind of likable charm as its predecessors. The conclusion is pure corn, as you say. But by this point, it fits with the tone of the franchise. The apparent joy of its creation is infectious. I smiled throughout most of this film, laughed through some of it. It's a blissful bout of nostalgia. The story it's weightless, and it's definitely an unnecessary sequel.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's impossible not to have fun with this one. And plus, the killer robot from the future is played by Anthony Carrigan, who is a NoHo Hank from Barry,
Yeah.
and he is a perpetual joy. So yeah, like how would you rate Bill and Ted Face the Music?
Ooh, I'm gonna give it a 6, right? Like all round enjoyable. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
particularly life changing, I think, but just for like 1.5 hours of like nostalgia and fun, it's a good watch.
Hmm. Same. I'm rating it similarly. It's 6.5 out of 10.
Mm.
Good fun to watch, but maybe not essential viewing lah.
Yep.
Next up, we'll be moving on to Disney's live action adaptation of Mulan. While Mulan probably was destined to be a box office juggernaut, due to the pandemic, it's been released on Disney Plus in many countries for an exorbitant fee of $30. In some countries, however, such as Singapore, it's being released in cinemas.
Hmm.
And if you don't already know, of course, this is the remake of the iconic 1988 animated film of the same name. But truth be told, the Mulan legend is 1,500 years old. There have been dozens of iterations of the original folk tale over the years,
Hmm.
over different Chinese regimes, even before Western hands got the story. There isn't really a real Mulan story. It's changed over the different retellings.
Yep.
So staying faithful is not really something they can do lah. But I guess, like a lot of people are upset that director Nikki Caro has somewhat controversially removed the film's musical numbers in favor of a more mythical but straightforward wuxia-style period war drama
Yeah.
that is somewhat more closer to the Chinese folktale than the animated version is lah.
Yeah.
And it does feature an impressive cast that includes Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Gong Li, Jason Scott Lee, Liu Yifei as the title character. The film is marred by a lot of political controversy, which I won't get into because it doesn't really affect the merit of the film, other than maybe to say that it is not a great representation for Chinese culture
Hmm. Yeah.
in Disney's hands. That's all I have to say about it. Like it filming, near the Ukir concentration camps and stuff like that. Obviously despicable, but I'm not going to comment on that because it bears no relation to the quality of the film, which is what we're here to talk about. So what do you think about Mulan, the movie?
Oh man, I put off watching Mulan for the longest time, right? So I only
Hmm.
caught it recently, and it was hard to kind of divorce myself from all the reviews that were kind of coming out, right?
Yep.
And just like reading what people were saying and people's like thoughts about that, there's something incredibly immediate, I think, about the way when movies like this hit streaming services, like
Hmm.
the moment you're done with the movie, right? You're already on your phone, you're already on your computer, right? And you're
Hmm.
gonna blast whatever you think about it there. There's no kind of like gestation period for you to kind of wait after the movie and talk about it with your friends.
Yep.
And so there's just a whole flood of that. And
Hmm.
I tried very hard to give the movie a chance, just because I feel like a lot of people really didn't like it,
Mm.
and a lot of people is like, yeah, it's okay, but and there was always a but, I think. And
Hmm.
for me, like, after watching it, I feel kind of the same.
Mm.
All in all, it tries very hard. Like it
Yeah.
really, really does try very hard, without really going anywhere. On its merits as a movie alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Political controversy aside, it is messy,
Yeah.
and the pacing is all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
The character work isn't great, and neither is the script. I don't think that enough research was done into exactly how things should look and should feel and should sound like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just in general, like I didn't like this isn't something that I'm gonna remember, right?
Mm.
Like a week from now, not like years down the road. Whereas the original one, which we will always be drawing comparisons to, right, is a classic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the it feels as though this Mulan, right, this live action Mulan, um, set up everything to have messaging, but I
Mm.
have no idea what that message actually is, right?
Girl power, etc.
Yeah, so that didn't really come across as you know, sure, right? On the surface, if we want to kind of read it that way,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it doesn't do well as a girl power film. I think it doesn't
Mm.
do well as a wuxia film. I think definitely as a wuxia film, it kind of fell flat. Like certain scenes were definitely very very beautiful, but the over reliance on CGI in certain
Mm-hmm.
parts, I felt kind of let it down because it just like it's very hard to have um these amazing. For example, let's talk about like if we do Hero or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? The
Mm-hmm.
majesty of the background in which all these fights take place or the story
Mm-hmm.
takes place, right? There's something that CGI can't replicate, you know, and for
Mm-hmm.
you to kind of aspire to that with CGI is kind of problematic
Mm-hmm.
in many many places. And that was a bit jarring as well, you know, and not enough training montages, I feel. Like
Mm.
how do you go, right, from a village girl blessed with chi
Mm-hmm.
to where she ends up at the end of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's just a huge question mark there, as to like, you know, because somehow innately talented as you are, you know how to sword fight, right? You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
learn how to sword fight in a couple of months. You're gonna learn how to, you know, be a sharpshooter on the bow and arrow in a couple of months and acquire all this kind of like tactical and strategic knowledge that will allow you to take on an
Mm.
army single-handedly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like all that isn't explained, right? So if the messaging at the end of the day is girl power,
Mm.
what does that actually say?
Mm.
Right, that at the end of the day, oh, you know, it has to be something that you are it's innate and it's talented. It speaks nothing of the sacrifice of volunteering yourself.
She's a
The,
Mary Sue.
yeah,
She's
exactly.
she's she's Rey in Star Wars.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And all these things happen via magic, and I think if you truly want to have a movie about girl power, then like magic should play a much smaller role in it, you
Mm.
know. We take away Mushu because, you know, fantastical element, and then you substitute it with fantastical elements of your own, right, with the
Mm-hmm.
inclusion of the witch, and this idea of Chi, who nobody else seems to have except the two women
Mm-hmm.
in the film, right? So like it's really problematic, um, in so many ways, and it's confused. It's a confused film,
Mm.
in terms of like what its message is supposed to be, what its identity is supposed to be, you know. And I found myself actually being extremely annoyed by the fact that the refrain that they're using right now for the major moments is, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like it's such a great song in the original movie. Now it's
Yeah.
used as like a 5 second refrain, right? And that's supposed to like stir all these like great nostalgic feelings about, oh yeah, you know, this is a remake of the original and the original was great, and therefore this is supposed to be great. I think they fell really short of the mark for this.
Yeah, I do agree. The one bright spot of the film, I guess, that I do have to give credit for is I like the cinematography.
Yep.
I think its framing, whoever the DP was, did a really good job capturing the color and the
Mm.
majesty of environments
Yep.
of China and the architecture and things like that. But yeah, it does have inconsistent acting quality, very thin character development, predictable nature of the narrative also bogs the movie down.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, the decision to give Mulan mystical Oriental superpowers negates the feminist themes.
Yep.
The animated Mulan worked really hard for her to earn respect. She used her skill and wit and determination to change perceptions,
Mm-hmm.
not she.
Yep.
She trained hard for it. She earned the respect.
Yep.
And this Mulan doesn't. Yeah, it's a little paint by numbers. The story's a little too safe. And all the anti Hong Kong democracy sentiments by its cast members and the anti Ukir thing that where they chose to film,
Mm-hmm.
expressed by its cast and crew, didn't help its cause at all. People already wanted to dislike it, and they're just giving you more reasons to dislike it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess that despite its sumptuous design and good intentions, this movie is pretty much a failure lah. So I would rate this 3 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm not gonna give it. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. Right.
Okay.
Like, I find it so difficult to believe that an animation that came out in 1998 that has the exact same runtime tells a much tighter, more rich, and better story
Hmm.
than this multi-million dollar waste of time.
Well, you can say the same thing about most of Disney's live action remakes lah.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe uh, Beauty and the Beast, maybe.
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast, it was pretty okay. I don't know, Jungle Book was okay, but I mean, that
Yeah.
like say the Lion King and Aladdin and stuff like that, I think were kind of similar failures lah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but the good news for Disney is that they're not running out of animated stuff to remake, and they're gonna
No.
keep doing it until they stop making money from it, which doesn't seem like anytime soon. They're gonna keep banking on the nostalgia. Mulan was a miss, lah, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. They're
Yeah.
gonna eventually become. I mean, we often shit on like anime live adaptations, right?
Mhm.
Just because they have historically been bad, right? It's very hard to find a simple good one. And the way Disney is going about with all their remakes, we're going to fall into the same thing. That's going to be the prevailing stigma
Mhm.
with the stuff that they make into live action.
I do have to say though that I do appreciate the attempt on some films such as
Mm-hmm.
Aladdin and Mulan to differentiate the live action from the animated
Mm-hmm.
film. In
Yeah.
the case of like the Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, it's pretty much a shot for shot retelling, just with CG instead of hand drawn animation,
Yeah.
and that smacks of laziness lah. I'm not anti remake, but if you want to remake something, at least go a different route with it.
Agreed.
And whether you fail or whether you succeed, I do appreciate the attempt in this case to make it different from the animated film.
Mm-hmm.
Those who want it to be a shot for shot adaptation of the animated film, I don't understand what your
Yeah.
point of view is,
Yeah.
because why not just rewatch the animated film?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even on its own merits,
Mm.
it doesn't hold, right? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, I would have loved it if it was a straight out, like, pure wuxia thing,
Yep.
But I mean, you can't have that because Disney, right? And they
Mm.
don't have that kind of. It's not in their desire to make a film like that. So I stumbled across an entire list of all the other kind of Mulan adaptations
Hmm.
that come highly recommended, and I'm probably gonna take some time to go on, watch them as well, just to see what it could have been, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, didn't like Mulan, but would recommend Bill and Ted. If you want to go watch Mulan, it's available right now in Singaporean cinemas. If you're overseas, of course, there's Disney Plus and VOD. Beyond that, also available on VOD. They made a wise choice to avoid cinemas altogether.
Yep.
As we see with Tenet's box office, it's not really working out well.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I don't know lah. Tenet is hard to judge because it could just be because people don't like the film.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of people are kind of blaming Mulan's failure on the political controversy and all of that, and I get that as well. But I think the more simple explanation is just it's not a good movie.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah. Anyways, we're moving on to a tiny segment that I call quick hits,
Not-
where I talk about the various films and TV shows that my co-host hasn't had the chance to watch, and give them very quick reviews. Not really quick for
yeah. Not
this month though,
not really
and
small.
especially next month. But yeah, I'm gonna try to breeze through these titles as quickly as I can. First off, I want to talk about Amazon's The Boys, based on Garth Ennis's scathing and violent anti-superhero series. Amazon's The Boys is back for a second season this month.
Hmm.
If you will recall my season 1 review, I was mixed on it. The parts that I loved, I really loved. I adored its pitch black meta deconstruction of superhero tropes and the capitalist mega corporations that fuel society's obsessions with capes and tights as a means to make money and to distract from real world issues. It showcased just how destructive abuses of power or superpower can be from the powerful, ranging from Starlight being uh, coerced by another superhero into offering sexual favors in order to join the Seven, which is the show's Justice League analog,
Mm-hmm.
or the twisted way superheroes view the world and how easily they can destroy anything that inconveniences them. At the same time, I was frustrated um, by how these great themes were only explored on the surface level. The show seemed to have too much fun reveling in the gory meta nihilism and didn't do much beyond the gruesome action.
Yep.
And playing with the subversion of tropes that has already been subverted since Alan Moore's Watchmen,
Mm-hmm.
Ben Edlund's The Tick. I've kind of seen it done. Amazon's The Boys didn't really do anything too different in that respect in season one. So it was a mixed review. It was more of a 5 or 6 out of 10. I liked it, didn't love it. However, season two is a huge improvement.
Huh.
The best thing about the second season of The Boys is how smartly it adds complexity and depth to the characters and stories. But course correction not only goes beyond enriching the quote unquote power corrupts and quote unquote bad people are still people too themes. Though, of course, these carry on through the new episodes. The Boys has turned its attention towards a variety of new ideas, but none so potent as the manipulation of digital media and how cults of personality are formed and maintained. In the new season, it's not just Starlight that's the new member of the Seven anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Although her ethics and ideals are getting chewed up by the corporate machinery, that's still a focus. But she's joined by a savvy new member called Stormfront, who is a millennial influencer type. She upsets her on message corporate handlers. She calls out the shallowness of corporate feminism and corporate representation, especially when it comes to female and LGBTQ representation. She calls it out loud and often. So Starlight initially thinks she's found a common sense ally, a real person. That she can look to for female empowerment, unlike the corrupt Queen Maeve. But as with most things on the
Mm-hmm.
show, not as all it seems. Stormfront is, as it turns out, kind of many magnitudes worse than even Homelander is. She is a 4chan neo-Nazi person. In fact, it turns out she's an actual Nazi from back in the day, um, whose uncorporate, un-PC demeanor appeals to the very worst of America's right-wing extremists. And Stormfront's dynamic with her new teammates become one of the best storylines of the season because she's every bit as powerful as Homelander and more than willing to assert herself as the team's new heavyweight. And Homelander, the sadistic, narcissistic Superman, just doesn't quite understand why social media is turning against him.
Yep.
He's used to being universally adored, but he doesn't get why his $100 million PR campaign is being undermined by memes and viral tweets. Um, a lot of echoes of what's happening in the real world at the moment. Meanwhile, Billy Butcher, and his superhero killing crew are now fugitives on the run after being framed for the murder of Vought's former CEO. Of course, that quickly drives everyone a little stir crazy and pushes them into individual arcs that give the story opportunity to flesh out the characters wonderfully. There's also the rise of super terrorists, which keeps the world on alert. Of course, Vought has been manufacturing the superpowered criminals by secretly selling Compound V, the formula that gives normal people powers to, jihadi groups and criminals in an
Mm-hmm.
effort to create supervillains. This is so that they can create, antagonists for their heroes to fight in order to retain the public's attention and earn a lucrative military contract transferring jurisdiction of homeland security and overseas wars to their superheroes. In the super terrorist subplot, the boys' critique of an anti-immigrant and America First sentiment in the U.S. is abundantly apparent. On the flip side, there are character proxies of everything from AOC trying to take down Vought, or a Joss Whedon type director rewriting the latest The Seven crossover movie. So even when things are funny or ultra violence, the show makes a number of valid points about the destructive influences of mega corporations or capitalist machinery. Likewise, the show's snarky tone and gory action and penchant for broad side gags remain a delight. It's just a much smarter, sharper show with that's more engaged with the stories and characters this time. Even Carl Urban's Butcher, who was so single-minded and reductive in season one,
Mm-hmm.
finally gets to digging into some of the ambiguities within his grizzled anti-hero, teasing out the guy's darker side as his more vulnerable side, especially when it comes to his wife, who is basically Homelander's hostage at this point. If season one was mostly empty spectacle, a bunch of superpowered assholes unleashing hit vision blasts and concrete shattering punches, now I think we've got a reason to care with much deeper characters and much more timely themes to balance out the bleak nihilism that previously drove things along, which is why I'm rating this season at 8.5 out of 10. Very highly rated. Loved this one.
Wow. Okay.
Finale has not aired though. It's only been the first 6 episodes, so
Uh-huh.
I've not watched the last 2 episodes lah. So this is a review in lieu of watching the last two, but I've loved what I've seen so far. You can find it on Amazon Prime. Also on Amazon Prime, it is Raised by Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
This is atheist robots versus religious zealots in Ridley Scott's first ever TV series. Raised by Wolves is an ambitious, almost biblical parable centering around two androids named Father and Mother, tasked with raising human children on a mysterious new planet after Earth was destroyed by a great war. As the burgeoning colony of humans threatens to be torn apart by religious differences again, the androids learn that controlling the beliefs of humans is a treacherous and difficult task. You see, Mother and Father are trying to cultivate an atheistic society, but the threat of humanity and its theology always looms nearby. The religion in the show, in this mythology, is called the Mithraic. They are the perceived enemy, and they are this neo-puritanical, warmongering religious crusaders. They even dress like Christian crusaders back in the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
They seem like the obvious villains, but Raised by Wolves does a good job in subverting expectations, leaving the viewer to question which side of the struggle is worth rooting for: the well-intentioned yet thoroughly lethal robot parents, or the misguided human zealots looking for a new planet to call home. Firstly, the good stuff. Ridley Scott is fantastic at sci-fi world building.
Mm-hmm.
The world he creates here is splendid. The first episode is insane and one of the most spectacular pilots I've ever seen. Truly one of the greatest first episodes ever created. And Amanda Collins, who plays Mother, steals the show. Colin approaches her role in a unique way that kind of a mix of Alicia Vikander in Ex Machina
Oh.
and Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. Mother is an android with warrior-like skills and abilities that make her a powerful weapon. She alone can rival the entire Mithraic faction, and yet she shows a lot of vulnerability as she protects not only her son Campion, but several other children as well. Mother is a fearsome figure, and Colin plays her with tightrope terror. She is both a god and an anxious mother. However, the character work here, now onto the bad points. The character work here is pretty shoddy,
Mm-hmm.
uniformly elsewhere. Outside of Mother and Father, it's pretty bad. The human characters are inconsistently defined and weakly developed. As much as I appreciate the show's willingness to not overly explain the religion or the dystopian world that led humanity to flee Earth, it's astonishing how dull the humans are.
Mm-hmm.
The characters are too derivative to be compelling, and that's extraordinary. It's very frustrating because
Yeah.
everything else is quite good. The conflict between rationality and religion is sometimes presented in overly simplistic terms. This is no Dune, lah, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
Overall, though, Raised by Wolves is a sci-fi television of a rare breed. While premium cable and streaming services have continually raised the bar in terms of genre shows for years, I think Raised by Wolves leaps ahead in craft and skill and vision. Its novelistic storytelling and slow burn pacing ask a lot out of its audience, but those willing to engage and those who prefer big ideas over fleshed out characters
Yeah.
would love Raised by Wolves and will think it as a stunning work of operatic science fiction. Watching Raised by Wolves, you feel a certain gratitude that someone can still make sci-fi projects like this, even if not all of it works, or even if most of it doesn't work. I still have to commend the ambition here.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's a 5 out of 10.
Oh. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's disappointing.
Yeah. But like I like big swings. I like shows that take big swings and
Yeah.
shows that are ambition. I prize ambition that doesn't work over safe consistency.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which is why I think Raised by Wolves deserves some praise, even though it overall maybe doesn't work lah.
Okay. Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. And I'm going on an Amazon Prime roll here, man, because the next show is also on Amazon Prime. It is called Utopia. It is by best-selling author Gillian Flynn. Gillian Flynn, you may know as the author of Gone Girl and Sharp Objects. She serves as the writer and showrunner for this new drama called Utopia, about a group of hardcore fans of a graphic novel called Dystopia. So, okay, the show is called Utopia. The graphic novel in the show is called Dystopia. The intricate drawings of Dystopia uh, are believed to predict a series of world-ending crises.
Hmm.
It's almost like a prophetic comic book. When the original pages of a long-awaited sequel called Utopia surface and are put up for auction at a comic book convention, the desire to obtain these pages becomes deadly, and the mystery of the book's meaning deepens. The series premise is actually quite cool.
Hmm.
It's about comic book fans and geeks like us who find a comic book that is prophetic with world-ending implications. But it's actually adapted from a fantastic British series that aired in 2013 and 2014. So this is a remake of a British show. Uh, its cast is outstanding. There's John Cusack, there's Rainn Wilson from The Office, there's Jessica Roth, and a lot of other great talent. Sad to say though, I think Gillian Flynn's long run of successful thrillers comes to an end
Ah.
with this very irritatingly drawn out, disappointingly oblique show.
Hmm.
Despite being about the end of the world, the show feels strangely stagnant in the first 5 episodes that I watched.
Yep.
And I kind of tapped out with the five. The series incorporates a slew of thematic elements that are eerily timely. For example, there is a devastating pandemic for one.
Hmm.
Uh, but an over reliance on brutal violence masks the fact that Utopia doesn't have much to say about corporate overreach or governmental listlessness, these themes that inspired the show's concept. The series is awash with details that sync up with our current moment. It's so timely.
Hmm.
Characters are worrying about disease-carrying bats spreading a pandemic. How timely is that? And complain about the CDC and the Food and Drugs Administration working too slowly on a vaccine. They turn to corporations who unironically boast of quote unquote disruption to save them instead of big government. They are horrified by the perceived harm, including sexual violence against children.
Hmm.
But Utopia doesn't offer any theories about how our culture changes because of this kind of panic,
Yep.
or comment on the fervent nature of fandom, or examine the anxiety of confronting the potential end of the world. It even abandons the British version's kind of black comedy vibe, instead choosing to crisscross subplots with a very dour tone and quite predictable twists. And it's almost fetishistic in its depiction of violence.
Hmm.
That is exploitative and not necessary. That is why I'm giving Utopia a 3 out of 10. I would
Oof.
highly recommend you to watch the British version of Utopia though.
Okay.
Also available on Amazon Prime. That is an 8 out of 10.
Mm.
But the current one that's out right now, the Gillian Flynn version, the US version, 3 out of 10. Avoid it at all costs.
Oof. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Next up, I'll be talking about Antebellum, which is a new independent film starring Janelle Monae. She stars as Veronica, who is a successful present-day author
Hmm.
who finds herself cornered in a realm of terror that upends her very reality. She is a modern-day author, keep in mind, and one day she wakes up in a cotton plantation, dressed in period clothing and at the mercy of slave owner Elizabeth, played by Jenna Malone, and the Confederate soldiers who are living there. Significantly, nothing of the land surrounding the plantation grounds is shown.
Hmm.
What sounds at first like a fascinating adaptation of Octavia Butler's Kindred, instead fumbles when the narrative goes ham-fisted into a fully predictable ending. Without spoilers, I can say that you have seen this before and you have seen it done better. The twists are almost M. Night Shyamalan-esque in their clumsiness.
Okay.
I'm talking about like 2005 to 2012 M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like that. It's that clumsy. The sad thing is, they've got a really tour de force for performance at their disposal. Janelle Monae really wows in the lead role. There's a
Hmm.
great gravity to her words, and her silence is quite magnetic as well, whether she's talking or not. Likewise, the lead performances all around are great, including Jenna Malone as the villainous slave owner, alongside Kiersey Clemens, who blew me away last year in a deserted island monster film called Sweetheart. She is quite commanding, and as a fellow plantation captive, Julia. Unfortunately, the dialogue is quite badly written.
Yeah.
If only the filmmakers trusted the actors to convey the messages of the story instead of burdening them with obvious explanatory lines and speeches. Antebellum has a lot to say about race, class, and gender, issues inextricable for Black women, but the themes are so heavy-handed that they kind of end up being counterproductive.
Hmm.
Um, Antebellum loads up on visceral scares and disturbing imagery in surface of a shallow film that feels like a gory theme park ride, showcasing the horrors of slavery. It ends up reaffirming the very horror it is critiquing.
Mm.
This is especially disappointing given the film's technical mastery.
Yeah.
Steadicam and serpentine camera work fuse imagery of the past and the present together seamlessly. The directors Bush and Rents shoot every scene with the kind of tension and control that suggests the duo might have a very big future. But the script is self-defeating. It's a jumbled mess, and it is the very kind of slavery horror that is so counterproductive that it almost feels exploitative.
Oh,
So I'm giving this a 4.5 out of 10.
oh man. Yeah. I was hoping for more, actually.
Same. Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of sad. That's kind of sad.
yeah.
I'm
I
hoping
was.
that doesn't put Janelle Monae off of doing more like this.
Mhm,
Just because I mean, like I love her music. I think she's an all round amazing performer.
mhm.
Yeah. So hopefully, we get something else, from her. That
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. If you do want to watch Antebellum, though, it is available on VOD. Next up, I'm shifting from Amazon Prime over to Netflix. Everyone has Netflix, so you might have noticed that there is a new Netflix hard sci-fi drama starring Hilary Swank. It's called
Yeah.
Away.
Mm.
Um, you have seen Away a bit, right?
I've seen some of it, most of it actually.
Okay.
Like maybe 2/3 of it.
All right, all right. So for the premise wise, Hilary Swank stars as Emma Green. She is an American astronaut who must leave her husband and teenage daughter behind in order to command an international space crew embarking upon a 3-year-long mission to Mars. The astronauts on the mission are an international crew, and I think the astronauts are pretty fun actually. The crew it is they're pretty fun.
Yeah.
At first they wonder if Commander Green is up to the task, thanks to a freak accident early in the mission. I don't need to tell you that Emma will have to go about winning her team over one by one. Back home, though, Emma's husband Matt is running points at NASA Mission Control and providing emotional support to their teenage daughter Alexis, who is not happy about her mom's 3-year absence.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where the show falls apart. Away is half a good show. It is fun and energetic when it's in space. When it lives up to its title, it's a really good show. It manages to smartly incorporate a crisis of the week approach that is pretty exciting.
Hmm. Hmm.
But unfortunately, it is also bogged down by the other half, which is a dull family story about the people left behind. It should have been Apollo 13, but large chunks of it feel like the serious prestige drama film of Ryan Gosling's film, the First Man.
Yeah.
um the scenes with Commander Green's family are so irritatingly cliche and tedious. So I loved half of it and hated half of it. How about you?
Exactly my kind of thoughts, right? Like everything in the spaceship was really good. Like all the stories there, all the conflict there, just the actors who played the astronauts itself. Like I
Yeah.
understand that some of the story that feeds into what's going on in the spaceship naturally has to happen on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't enjoy any of that. Right? Like it was
Yeah.
just so meh. Like how do we go from this like okay, I understand that we have this whole first time going to Mars historical event, right? Pushing the boundaries of science and exploration and all of that. Great. And then we go into high school drama with her daughter.
Yep.
which is
Yep.
entirely just like it's not even good drama, right?
Hmm.
And that was so jarring to me that I gave up. I just couldn't. Like past a certain point, I think I was just like, let let your mom get on with her mission so that I can
Mm-hmm.
see more of your mom in space, right? And like get yourself together, lah, basically, right? You're not the only girl in the world who's facing, a similar thing with an absent parent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But by and large, like I really have to say that the kind of chemistry that they got with the actors on board the ship, solid, really,
Solid.
really solid. The tension, when the tension's there, the tension's good.
Mm.
When it's lighthearted and breezy, it's really, really good. A lot of very complicated emotions, a lot of pretty nuanced acting, I have to say. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not particularly fond of Hilary Swank's performance per se. I
Mm.
feel like the supporting cast did a much better job. My favorite actor is definitely the guy who plays the Russian astronaut.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And like you said, it was only enjoyable half the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the more we kind of skewed towards the further they got away from Earth, and the more we skewed towards seeing more of Earth, I just got turned off.
100% agree. Which is why I'm rating this a 5 out of 10. It's half a show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Five is reasonable for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna fail it because the parts that work quite well and had me entertained lah. But the parts that don't work, eh. Which is to say that if you do watch it, I won't recommend it. But if you do watch it, there are some merits to a way lah. But
Yeah,
I don't think this is something that you're gonna be invested in or hooked for the long term.
it feels like I mean, there seems to be a very few kind of like space related like near future space movies like that or series
Mm.
like that at the moment. So if
Mm-hmm.
you really need your binge, sure, right?
Yeah.
If you need your fix, but it's not great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only way the show can fix this if let's like a comet hits Earth and then everyone dies, and then they just focus on the away team. That would be great.
Yeah, that was
Um, but anyways, moving on.
yeah.
I'm going to be talking about Noughts and Crosses, which is a BBC show. It is adapted from Marjorie Blackman's young adult novel series. Noughts and Crosses imagines a world where Europe was colonized by Africans 700 years ago,
Hmm.
with white people being enslaved for centuries. It is set in present day London, known as Albion in the show.
Hmm.
Slavery is an institution of the past, but the Jim Crow esque segregation laws maintain a power dynamic. There is a ruling class of black crosses who control the country's politics, wealth, and culture over an oppressed, impoverished underclass of white people called Knots, who are on the brink of revolution. Against this backdrop of prejudice and distrust and rebellion, the story let me remind you, is based on a YA novel.
Hmm.
The story is focused on two star-crossed young adults named Callum and Sephi, who are divided by their skin color. They're obviously in love, as you know, it's a YA novel. Uh, so our perspective on this alternate universe is that of Callum, who is a knot, and Sephi, who is a cross. But she's not only a cross; she is the daughter of the Home Secretary, Kamal Hadley,
Hmm.
a particularly privileged cross. So Callum and Sephi were childhood playmates in the house where Callum's mother was employed as a servant.
Yep.
When Callum is roped in to help serve drinks at a birthday party for Mrs. Hadley, they meet as young adults and rekindle their affection. So this love story across racial lines is a dangerous one. However, it's further complicated by the involvement of Callum's family in a not paramilitary group, essentially a terrorist organization determined to overturn the power structure.
Hmm.
In a deviation from the books, the characters have been aged up about 5 years, making Callum and Sephi full participants in Albion society with all
Hmm.
its racisms that is insidious and overt. So I think that's kind of a smart decision. They're not just their story isn't in the background. The story is
Yep.
intertwined with the politics as well. A small example, that gets brought up in classrooms everywhere, especially in Britain, focuses on in the first episode, Callum getting a flesh-colored plaster that doesn't match his skin tone. It's
Hmm.
a black plaster. So it's a an interesting way to showcase, just the little things that you don't think about that the dominant culture imposes upon the less dominant culture lah.
Mhm.
In contrast, Safi has an exciting array of higher education opportunities, whereas Callum's best option is to enroll in the elite cross-military academy, Mercy Point, even though it means he's alienated from his community, because he's joining the military
Yep.
and enduring relentless racist bullying in the academy itself. As a knot, he's subject to brutal policing, the routine disrespects of even little things like white names are constantly mispronounced in the show,
Mhm.
which is, I mean, it's great. And the racial kind of derogatory term in this world is blanker. For white people, they're called blankers.
Mhm.
It's a substitute for, I guess, the N word lah. Um, much of this kind of rings discordant bells with the viewer, which is down to the ingenious simplicity of Blackman's premise.
Yep.
What distinguishes Knots and Crosses from a counterfactual history series like The Man in High Castle is that it's barely fictionalized at all. The
Mhm.
world is our world. There is the same technology, the same geography, the same system of government, only flipped. In this context, African cultural dominance can feel like a celebration, but it constantly reminds you that if you think this world, if you think that Knots and Crosses is a dystopia, then our world is a dystopia too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that's kind of the simplicity, the genius in its simplicity lah. The world building here is quite phenomenal in that it pays attention to not only the architectural identity of a crossroad Albion. The buildings are all African-inspired architecture, but also to, as I mentioned, the ways the dominant culture shapes societal norms and mindsets.
Yep.
Everything from economic division to pop culture, to the music they listen to beauty standards, to fashion, illustrates this. The not kids, the white kids, they wear wax prints patterns, and their hair is constantly beaded in cornrows, and they do all of this unknowingly, despite them being anti-cross. It's
Yep.
just the way it is. It's just how they dress. It's the norm for them. And the world is sharply observed and convincingly built to make a few points very well. Racism is very real.
Mhm.
It is systemic and grounded in centuries of geopolitical injustice. Those with power are rarely aware of their privilege. Violent oppression breeds yet more violence, but through Sephi and Callum's story, it's also the idea, that love and commonality are the only ways out of inequality lah. Important messages all. However, the slight downside of Knots and Crosses is that the characters themselves
Mhm.
don't have the complexity to match its world building. The characters
Oh.
are okay. Like, I'm not saying they're badly written; they're just okay.
Yep.
There's nothing too special about them. There's nothing too deep about them. Like, they perform their roles and that's it.
Mhm.
And their roles are predefined and their actions are predictable because I know that they're playing types. They're not playing, really fleshed out characters.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, though, it's still a fascinating watch. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. This is one of those shows where like just the premise alone is good enough to for you to carry on. As the world building is so sharp and intuitive. It's so great. And I kept feeling discomfort throughout watching the show,
Mhm.
and I couldn't figure out why, because the show was exactly the same as our world. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
If I am to believe that this world is a dystopia, then I have to believe that my world is a dystopia too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Next up, I'm moving on to a film that will be released on October 1st on in Shaw theaters in Singapore, and you can find it VOD internationally. It is called Pinocchio. It is a new Italian live action retelling of Pinocchio.
Mm.
It is a beautifully nightmarish vision that stays faithful to Carlo Collodi's dark fairy tale. It is written and directed by Matteo Garrone,
Mhm.
and it really embraces the grotesqueness and sentimentality of the 1883 story, ensuring that it stands apart from previous adaptation of Pinocchio that might be more familiar to English language audiences. Like,
Mhm.
you might have read the English language adaptation in either fairy tale books or Disney. So the result of this is a moving and tender and sumptuous film that is also macabre and bizarre. Walt Disney, for example, never had Pinocchio being brutally hanged from a tree by
Mhm.
two swindlers who wanted to rob him. But one of the interesting things about this drama is that Pinocchio, the magical wooden puppet who yearns to be a real boy, gains this authentic humanness by constantly being exploited by suffering and finally being reborn with skin and hair.
Mm.
And this all happens because he's disobedient, he's naughty, he's disrespectful of his father's sacrifices, and he's very gullible to bad influences. But to be human is to grow wiser by learning from suffering,
Yep.
proud about from your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what Pinocchio is about. Pinocchio himself here is played with a woodified face by a real life child actor called Federico Ielapi, giving the character a surreal naturalism. It's not CGI, it's not animated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a child actor in wooden prosthetics, and his father, creator Geppetto, is played by the legendary Roberto Benigni.
Mm-hmm.
So Roberto Benigni, if you remember, also directed Pinocchio film back in 2002, which wasn't very good, but this one is. It is buoyed by a very rich atmosphere, wonderful slash disturbing prosthetics and makeup, as well as very good practical effects. I think that's the thing. The practical effects here really scared me. In the way that Dark Crystal, for example, back in the day scared me.
Yep. Yep.
So Pinocchio is a very sweet but also baroque parable of parenthood and growing pains that will definitely give you nightmares. It's a 7.5 out of 10. As I mentioned, it's out in cinemas right now.
Nice.
You can watch it in Shaw Theaters. Really loved it. For it's an Italian film, so be aware, like, you got to read subtitles. Speaking of subtitles, I'm moving on to a film called #Alive. It is found on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
It is a Twitch era live stream Gen Z take on the zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
And it's probably the most perfect zombie movie for the coronavirus era.
Mm-hmm.
Alive is a South Korean thriller about how two young kids in Seoul cope with a zombie outbreak by staying in lockdown at home, playing video games, watching TV, checking social media for updates, and just trying to ride the virus out. I instantly became self-aware that the lead character's approach to a zombie apocalypse would very likely be similar to mine, which makes it very relatable.
Yep.
We all imagine that we will be like Daryl in The Walking Dead, but if the last few months have taught me anything, is that we'll probably be exactly like this.
Mm-hmm.
We just retreat. Our main character Jun Woo spends portions of his time creating a vlog and Alive attempts to articulate the mental toll of a situation like a sudden apocalypse can bring. And with the scenes mostly basing themselves from Jun Woo's apartment, the theme is less about zombies and more about loneliness when you're forced to social distance.
Mm-hmm.
With its focus on urban isolation and bonding with strangers through technology, I was ready to really love #Alive. But I think, unfortunately, its final act kind of turns into a standard zombie film
Yeah.
when Junwoo is forced to leave his apartment. Plus, the main character of Junwoo is actually pretty underwritten, serving more as a symbol
Mm-hmm.
for millennials and Gen Z rather than an actual character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the downsides kind of bog the film down a bit. So I would give it a just pass. It's a 5.5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
All right. Next up is Netflix's latest video game adaptation. Hot off the success of Castlevania comes a new show called Dragon's Dogma. It's an anime-styled adaptation of a video game. Having not played the game myself, I can only say
Mm-hmm.
that the hero is a fairly generic fantasy protagonist named Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
By the first episode, Ethan, his family, and his entire village is massacred by a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, he's resurrected as a warrior who sets out to reclaim his stolen heart from the dragon. This turns Ethan into an Arisen, which is never really explained in the show, but mostly means that he's an adventuring hero with no heart, and he gets paired up with a quote-unquote pawn, P-A-W-N, who is an immortal sidekick with no emotions or personality of their own. Each episode is named after one of the seven deadly sins, and then the plot involves someone in this once idyllic seeming fantasy world succumbing to that eponymous sin and either falling prey to a big monster or becoming a monster themselves.
Mm.
Solid structure. The thing about the plot and storytelling, though, is that they are more surprisingly good than they are actually good. The writing is quite bad, and in case you don't guess the very predictable twist ahead of time, it is painstakingly explained once the twists start to unfold. It is an anime trope that I hate the most, the over explanation of a twist. There is also a noticeable issue with female characters who are all either nags or sex objects or sainted motherly figures.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely hard to ignore the caricatures here. Dragon's Dogma is kind of engaging as it unfolds, but it doesn't leave a lasting impact. The trick the trick is that its larger story is quite neat, it's quite fun, but it's quite telegraphed as well.
Hmm.
And there's not much else about the show that makes it special or unique. So yeah, it's fun but forgettable. Anime adaptation of the video game.
Yeah.
Did you watch this?
I gave it 2 episodes and I dropped it because I kind of
Yeah.
figured out where it was gonna go, and to hear that I kind of called it ahead of time, I'm glad I didn't.
Oh, you definitely called it, man.
Yeah,
This is I think this is a 5 out of 10. It's fun, predictable, but it's fun but predictable, so it's a 5 out of 10.
yeah. There's plenty of good anime to watch, so.
I know. If you haven't seen Castlevania, I would suggest you watch Castlevania instead.
Mhm.
Next up, I'm down to the last couple. I'm going to be talking about The Secret Garden, which is a new fantasy British film based on a 1911 novel of the same name by Francis Hodgson Burnett, I believe.
Mhm.
It is set in England during 1947. The Secret Garden follows a young orphan girl who, after being sent to live with her uncle, discovers a magical garden on the grounds of his estate. Burnett's 1911 novel never shied away from the rough stuff. Like most of her work, the book is concerned with orphans and illness, and it used real world pains to make its magical pleasures richer.
Mhm.
So, yes, magic is there, but magic isn't really the point. Um, the story's latest big screen adaptation tries to stretch that magical concept to strange ends, and not all of them benefit the film.
Mhm.
This movie is vested in the idea that the Secret Garden could use a little more imaginative freshening. It wants to make magic the primary theme, not the underlying theme.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, it never quite coalesces, resulting in a film that tilts uneasily between gothic drama and childish magic, without ever really succeeding with either tone. Like The Garden at its heart, The Secret Garden found its beauty in its quietude. I'm talking about the book here.
Yep.
It finds beauty in quietude, and a small story of hearts broken and healed through nature, attentive care, and true connection with others. But this adaptation doesn't quite understand that. Instead, it drowns the film in showy set pieces and magical realism rather than understanding the inherent magic in all things.
Mhm.
And in lieu of plumbing the emotional states of the characters, the film resorts to whimsical, otherworldly fantasy elements as an easy resolution. So I'm
Um.
failing this one. This is a 2 out of 10 for me.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Last one I'll be talking about is the latest season of Winona Earp. I'm a big fan of Winona Earp. I've talked about Winona Earp a lot over the last over the course of Genre Equality. Actually,
Mhm.
it's actually been on a 2-year break due to a budget dispute between the showrunners and the Sci-Fi Network. The thing is, the Sci-Fi Network actually signed on for this season ages ago. They had to fulfill it, lah.
Yeah.
But they just didn't have the money to produce it. So it went on hold for 2 years, but it's finally back. The fan favorite Western horror series is finally back for a fourth season. It picks up immediately after the third season's cliffhanger. And to the show's credit, like, it feels like no time has passed at all. The series is as fun and accessible as always, with plenty of great action sequences alongside its wry and quippy Buffy-esque sense of humor.
Mhm.
The vampire Doc Holliday sets out to rescue Winona's half sister, who's also an angel, Waverly, who was trapped in an alternate dimension at the end of season 3, and bring her back to the real world. Meanwhile, her town, the small western town of Purgatory, Winona continues to deal with her family curse. And she's now without her trusty and mythical revolver Peacemaker, since the Earp curse was lifted last season, as she and Waverly's long-term girlfriend, Nicole, investigate the latest supernatural threats that have arisen to menace the town. As always, despite the high stakes, Winona Earp's sly wit permeates, enabling the show to maintain a sense of self-awareness and poke fun at any perceived self-importance and common genre tropes, much in the same way that Legends of Tomorrow does.
Mhm.
Um, this is buoyed by always entertaining main cast, now 4 seasons into their working relationship, playing off each other with relative ease and natural chemistry. For fans like me that campaign for the show's renewal, there's plenty to celebrate here. However, it must be said that the show's sense of humor tends to distract from the stakes quite a bit.
Hmm.
But constant references
Yep.
can become overbearing at times. It it wasn't a problem in previous seasons, but it's become a bit like Deadpool 2 here.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish they'd kind of tone it down sometimes to let the drama resonate rather than just poke fun at everything. Oh, look, this reminds me of that genre trope, and this reminds me of that genre trope. Yes, I get it,
Mm-hmm.
but just tone it down a bit. Um, and this season, while strong overall, does have a larger share of weak episodes, which is compounded by the reduced budget, so it makes it look like an even cheaper 1990s show.
Mm.
Yeah, that's why I'm only giving this a 6 out of 10.
Okay, okay. It just seems like for this month's quick hits is a lot of like promising but
Yeah,
disappointing.
middle of the range episode, middle of the range shows and films.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I will say that the Boys is probably the best show that I've watched this month lah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Anyways, speaking of other things on Netflix, you have your mini quick hits right now. We'll be talking about an anime that recently debuted on Netflix called The Great Pretender.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Great Pretender popped up well, just slightly a couple of weeks ago, right? And we follow a our protagonist, a small-time Japanese confidence trickster who aspires to greater things. What's his name? Makoto. Uh, Fondly called Edamame by his eventual colleagues. He is hoping to find a good job to pay his ill mother's medical bills, and we get that in a kind of a flashback. He ends
Okay.
up falling into fraud in the course of that, and eventually his mother passes away, bringing him fully into the world of being a con man. He eventually meets an American man who cons him instead,
Hmm.
and it ends up with him traveling to LA
Yep.
to form part of the crew there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, in essence, it's a crime anime. The whole con man thing that we've seen kind of fairly frequently.
You son
Uh,
of a bitch, I'm in.
yes. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much, right? So he ends up in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and in attempt to kind of defend his self-proclaimed like Japan's greatest swindler, he makes a bet
Oh. Okay.
with his new partner slash rival slash boss.
Mm-hmm.
And That's kind of where it starts. So there are three main arcs in the anime itself, right? There's one that takes place in Hollywood. The second one, which I'll go to a bit more, just because that is called Singapore Skies, and it's fascinating, just because we yet again get another anime that takes a look at the Singapore kind of like cityscape, in
Yeah.
a very interesting way. And the last one is called London Snow, which I think is the strongest out of
Okay.
the three arcs, which I think is a bit closer to the kind of like con man shows that I like Matchstick Man and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Whereas the rest are a bit more like Oceans at its kind of like most popular, right?
Right.
Yeah. So basically the three arcs. Okay, the first arc fairly easy. They're trying to con a mafia boss slash Hollywood producer
Mm-hmm.
into buying the latest greatest designer drug from Japan, right? And it's a great kind of like it's a great kind of way for us to get to know the characters and what their likes and their quirks, and there's a fair bit of quirks going on. And the team that they've assembled is fairly interesting in terms of the way they kind of cooperate with each other. They're all lone wolves, but they're coming together just because there's money to be made, or there's some sort
Mm-hmm.
of like personal vendetta involved with it.
Hmm.
And that kind of all plays out, and it eventually ends up with I don't think it's too big a spoiler. I'm just gonna dive into it. It eventually ends
Okay.
up with Makoto going back to Japan to
Mm-hmm.
repay all the people he's conned,
Yep.
with the money that he's earned from this first time. From this first,
Mm.
they call it a case. It's not really a case, but
Yep.
sure. Uh, which sees him end up going into jail, from which he is released eventually, just to be sucked back into the next case, which is called Singapore Skies, and it is about competitive uh plane racing slash dogfighting, pretty much, right?
Okay.
So you have all these stunt planes and all these pilots, and there are all these set courses that they go around the world, much like F1, but planes, right? Basically, that's the premise of the
Yep.
story. The entire arc is set in Singapore, right? In
Nice.
particular, in our Marina Bay area. So you have these
Wow.
amazing scenes of gorgeously rendered and fairly true to life,
Mm.
um, architecturally and just like in terms of the space and how they capture everything. So you have that whole scene there, and most of that arc takes place there. Uh, and you have like these planes just zooming in and out of the buildings, and there's a scene with them on the giant Ferris wheel, Singapore Flyer.
Yep.
And it's so interesting just to see what um an artist or a studio's depiction of your country is like. And we've
Mm.
gotten a fair number of that over the years. I think A Place Beyond the Universe had one,
Mm-hmm.
which was incredibly detailed and showcased like a lot of corners of Singapore that people started to recognize, and a
Yep.
ton of other things. Like Singapore is fairly popular, but to have the entire story take place here was kind
Mm.
of refreshing. I think like it's the first time that we've had something so meaty, and although it never kind of like discusses Singapore in the story itself, right? It could be anywhere else in the world, like the story
Right.
takes place. It's fairly fun just to see it play out that way, right? The
Mm.
animation, all in all, is very detailed, very colorful, very bright, and very dynamic. The voice acting, for the most part, when it's in Japanese, is fantastic. The English dub is not bad, but whenever you're listening to the Japanese audio and they're trying to speak English, it is horrendously bad.
Oh wow.
Like bad enough for me to like want to put it on mute.
Mm-hmm.
And annoying about. And the problem with that is especially in the first couple of episodes, there is a before the magic universal translator gets turned on, there
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of that, right?
Yep.
Of our main character trying to speak in English, and it's indecipherable
Yeah.
at all. So if you can kind of like cringe through that, like I think overall, the quality of the animation is great. The art style is great. The music is amazing because it's littered with like a lot of these like jazz step, acid jazz kind of beats going along. Like it's
Mm.
good stuff on that, and like it's everything that you kind of want from a a series of this genre, right?
Mm.
And I mean, I would say like it takes a lot from your New Harvest and your Samurai Champloo and your Cowboy Bebop and all of that, and
Yeah.
it kind of carries on that tradition of really really good beats,
Mm.
set to this very well, pretty run of the mill
Mm.
con man story. But
Yeah.
it just adds to kind of the enjoyment, right? There are no major kind of twists or turns. There's nothing groundbreaking in terms of its story,
Mm-hmm.
but altogether a very well put together series. I think.
Okay.
What I highly encourage you to watch it for the animation and
Mm.
the music and the fact that especially if you're living in Singapore, it's a very interesting kind of perspective on what our cityscape is like.
Yeah. How would you rate it overall?
I think it's pretty good. I'm gonna give it a 6.5. Like I enjoyed
Okay.
it, and it's a fairly breezy watch. I think as we go into the third act, London Snow, that's kind of where the meat and potatoes of the conman genre really get fleshed out,
Right.
more than anything else. And like I foresee this. I mean, like it seems to be doing pretty well on
Mm.
Netflix itself. So I foresee them having more seasons to come, and it might get stronger from here. We'll see.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a 6.5
Uh,
for me.
Also on Netflix is a new children's animated show based on the Jurassic Park franchise. It's called Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. You managed to catch this with your nephew?
I got a couple. Yeah, I got a
Yeah.
couple. With them. Okay, so the thing is that I was thinking, sure, dinosaurs, kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pixar, sure, let's do this.
Right.
Um, it's it's not bad,
Okay.
but it is incredibly scary for something that's tailored to kids.
Right, right. It's about the six teenagers who have been invited to the inaugural week of Camp Cretaceous
Yeah.
at Jurassic World. As we all know, whenever people arrive at Jurassic theme parks, shit hits the fan and dinosaurs run loose again. The kids are forced to work together, but it's complicated by the fact that one of them might be a spy. Dun dun dun. Yeah. So you were saying?
Yeah, so it's not fun and games, right? And I
Right,
think
right.
I'm a little I come away a bit confused as to what the target audience for this particular series is.
It's quite violent, right?
Yeah, it that the kids are constantly in mortal danger,
Yeah.
constantly, right? There are parts in it that are like there were certain scares that got me, you know.
Mm.
And I'm so curious because, like, on the one hand, we get these teens who are going there, like, no grand insight into like the social life of teens right here, you know. More or less, like, the characters start off as very stock and they end off as even more stock
Mm-hmm.
characters. Like, there is some character growth, some character arcs, but I mean it's kind of minimal, right? uh so the question is, like, I don't think anybody below the age of 10 would be watching this just because of
Mm.
how scary it is, right? Like, it's pretty intense at certain points in time.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of well, people getting eaten, basically, right? There's no on-screen gore.
Yeah, there's
um
no blood or anything.
there's no
Yeah.
blood or anything, but
Yeah.
these kids, these teens, right, or tweens, face death at an alarmingly high
Mm.
rate,
Mm-hmm.
and their responses to it don't quite
Mm.
match that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's some quips about like dead bodies lying in a car that really, I just like, really,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And this is from like the wimpy kid in the group, right, who
Right.
is like
Right.
sanitizing his hands like all the time,
Mm.
right? And he makes a quip about dead bodies in the car, and I'm just like, are you serious? Like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, there's an opportunity there to write something really good, right? But we
Mm.
get kind of none of that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, I feel that the animation for the dinosaurs is amazing.
Mm. But on the flip side, for the humans,
Oh man, like, they might as well be mannequins. Like, I don't
yeah.
know if it's a budget thing or anything like that, but I just want a bit more detail. You know,
Mm.
the character designs are so plain,
Mm.
and the characters themselves are so plain,
Mm-hmm.
right? There were points in time, and pardon me for saying this, there were points in time that I just wanted the kids to get eaten so we could see like the dinosaurs like take over. Right? Like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really, really felt that way.
Make it primal,
Yeah,
right?
just like, exactly,
Yeah.
right? Because I feel like the dinosaurs are the star of the show, but they
Yeah.
didn't get as much screen time as they ought to have.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like, there plenty of plot armor all over the place, sure, right? Yeah. So again, it's one of those things, and I believe we said the exact same thing when we reviewed Fallen Kingdom. Was that the
Mm.
last one? Yeah, the exact thing, Fallen Kingdom, right? Great show without the humans, you
Yep.
know.
Yep. Yep.
We've got exactly the same kind of story here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, like, you caught this as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's a bit confused as you are about who this is for.
Yeah.
It's very violent, but bloodless violence.
Mm,
Characters are very literally and metaphorically very shoddily drawn.
yeah.
In terms of writing and in terms of animation, it's quite bad. I don't know, man. I thought it was fun for what it was.
Yeah.
Nothing really special about it. It ties into Jurassic World uh quite nicely.
Yes.
I like the canon of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I think you could give or take this. This is not essential viewing.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I just feel like with the quality that we got from the dinosaurs, like, the
Yeah,
dinosaurs have better story arcs than the kids,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
Carnotaur has a better story arc than our lead character kid, and it's so sad.
yeah.
That way, you know. And I just feel like if they had been a bit more bold with this, it could have been great, right? Like, the idea of kids living alone, I mean, like, struggling to survive in a Jurassic World gone mad. It could have been
Mm-hmm,
great. I mean, Lord of the Flies meets like Jurassic World. Damn, I'll be
mm-hmm,
down with that.
mm-hmm.
But they never quite push it that far, you know. So yeah, it's a miss for me.
How
Uh
would you rate it?
I'm gonna give it a 4.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna give it a 5, lah, but yeah, lah, I can see a 4 easily.
yeah. Just because like I don't know, it really is very lost. And I for what I think some kids might enjoy it. Okay, I feel like if you are old enough to be able to stomach the violence that you see, right, on
Yep,
screen or
yep.
off screen, you wouldn't be interested in the kid's story here.
Mm,
Or be interested in the. You might be old enough where you're actually growing out of being interested in dinosaurs in general. So, where does
mm.
that leave this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Similar feelings here, lah.
Mm.
Yeah, we're reaching towards the end of our episode, and I want to take some time to talk about Haikyuu, which is
Hmm.
back this month for the second half of season 4. I'm late to the party on this one. Fully admit I'm late to the party on this one. But volleyball anime Haikyuu. Spent the last few months binging it. And first and foremost, I would do want to say I've always considered Yuri on Ice to be the greatest sports anime ever made,
Yep.
with its one perfect season. However, the more I watch of Haikyuu, the more I'm reconsidering that opinion. And this isn't just one of the best sports anime I've ever seen. It's one of the best anime I've ever
Hmm.
seen.
Hmm.
Period. First, some background on the show. Haikyuu is based on a popular manga,
Yep.
which just ended its run a couple of months ago, actually.
Yes.
And it's produced by Powerhouse Studio Production IG. It follows the story of Shoyo Hinata, a boy determined to become a great volleyball player despite his small stature. He's very unskilled. There's no boys on the volleyball team in his junior high, so he's self-taught basically, and very short, especially for a spiker. But
Mm.
he is freakishly quick and athletic. In junior high, he becomes rivals with Tobio Kageyama, a genius setter and playmaker who's not just great at the school level, but a professional sting that it's only a matter of time before he makes the national team.
Yep.
Kageyama humiliates him in a tournament, humiliates Hinata, that is, at a junior high tournament, and that is the sole reason for Hinata's desire to defeat Kageyama. So
Mm.
once he graduates, he joins Karasuno High because of its high school volleyball program, a respected one, although on a downturn.
Yep.
The reason he fell in love with volleyball is because he once saw a Karasuno High game on TV.
Hmm.
He hopes to train there and beat Kageyama someday. On his very first day, he discovers that Kageyama has joined Karasuno too. So, beginning of the show, essentially about these two hated rivals learning to become teammates.
Yeah.
Story-wise, Haikyuu boasts one of the clearest examples of a simple story brought to its best. Karasuno was once a powerhouse, but
Hmm.
is now considered weak. They're attempting to rise back to their previous status and win the national volleyball tournament. And just maybe their two talented freshmen can, if they can get along,
Yeah.
the team can be great again. To reach the national tournament, a team must first win the qualifying prefecture tournament, which happens twice a year. Even within their own prefecture, there are a number of powerhouse schools that they need to overcome. And beyond that, the standard of the schools at the nationals is higher, obviously. I won't go much into Hinata and Kageyama's backstories,
Hmm.
but they form a really great dynamic, which reminds me of the one between, I guess, kind of Aang and Zuko in The Last Airbender.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one of the highest compliments I'm able to give to any animated show when
Hmm.
I compare it to the Last Airbender. The show is insanely fast paced. It's very consistent, and it never ceases to amaze me how they're able to raise tension and excitement for every tournament and for every game.
Yeah.
Character wise, I adore every single character in Haikyuu, and by season 4, there are 40 to 50 characters by the time we reach season 4,
Hmm.
because it's not just Hinata and Kageyama and their teammates. We get to know also all the players from all the opposing teams.
Hmm.
They're also humanized and characterized and fleshed out, and as much as any of the main characters are, but antagonists are not evil.
Yep.
Just another group of people trying to do the same thing and working just as hard. I feel the desperation and determination of both sides to win every match. Although I should be rooting for Karasuno, it's hard because both sides are easy to root for.
Yep.
And it makes me love every single character in the show. Each character feels like the protagonist of his or her own story,
Hmm. Hmm.
creates complex character dynamics and relationships, as well as great individual stories. And I have to say, the character building in the show and the characters in general, flawless. Animation wise, the show is phenomenal.
Yep.
From the reactions that I've seen from professional players who watch the show, the plays, the strategies, the tactics are all fairly accurate. It's just a little exaggerated for dramatic purposes, obviously, but it's not an all and out fantasy like
Yep.
Kuroko's basketball is,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
It's fairly grounded in real world principles. So everything animated is based on reality but drawn to accentuate the athleticism
Hmm.
and the drama. The volleyball sequences are phenomenal and they keep getting more and more exciting the further we get. The animation does a fantastic job of conveying how the players must feel and the people invested in the game as well. The dynamic movements in the matches feel uh, are incredible to watch, especially the slow downs and the slow mos, which suggest the impact of a scene
Yep.
or events. Amazing. It makes it very enjoyable. They cut to hand drawn moments as well as some crudely animated portions to portray the tension and at a point. The animation does exactly what it needs to. The voice acting and the soundtrack for the show is also very well
Hmm.
done.
Hmm.
It plays into the mood and the atmosphere of the show, and there's nothing I can say against it. It's one of the most mind-blowingly perfect animes I've ever seen. And I was watching this prior to the era of sports coming back. The EPL is back, the NBA is back, and stuff like that. At a certain point, March, April, May, they weren't around,
Hmm.
and I have to say, but as a sports anime, this really fixed my craving for live sports. I've never been on the edge of I don't get on the edge of my seats for sports anime. I do it for real sports, but the level of tension, my investment in the team, how dramatically the matches play out. There's several moments I just stand up cheering for my team like they're fucking real people. Uh, Really, it's such a perfect anime, man. Have you been watching Haikyuu as well? Now that it's on Netflix.
I mean, like I followed Haikyuu very consistently for the first two seasons, and then
Mm,
I only caught up with the third season once it got onto Netflix. So I love Haikyuu as well, just as much as you do. And I've been, I mean, ever since we put this on the list of things to talk about, right? And
yeah.
in anticipating season 4,
Hmm.
I was trying to figure out what it is about Haikyuu that sets it apart from the slew of really good sports animes that we've been getting
Hmm.
in the last couple of years, right? Like you've mentioned Yuri on Ice, Kuroko's Basketball, Hanebado
Yeah.
as well. And I was trying to figure out like what makes it stand out, like head and shoulders above the rest. And I think like it boils down to kind of two things.
Hmm.
The relationship between our two main kind of protagonists, right? Uh, is something that is very difficult to kind of boil down, and to have that embedded within a huge ensemble of characters who are all very well written, well thought out, and very human is rare, you know.
Yeah.
Couple that with the fact that the technicality of the animation is on par
Yeah.
with Hanebado, if not better at times, just because it's more complex than a badminton match,
Mm.
is makes it great, right? And the emotional stakes are as high as it gets. I think the emotional stakes are even higher than what we get on Yuri on Ice, you
Yeah.
know. And like for me, for the longest time, I think it was Yuri on Ice and then Hanebado. But those are sports that aren't big team sports, right? They
Mm.
aren't team sports in the way that volleyball or basketball is a team sport. So
Yeah.
just to have all this, like the realism of it,
Yeah.
where the characters feel substantial and the
Hmm.
sports feel substantial at the same time,
Hmm.
right? Is just like I mean, like in any kind of media, much less anime, right? It just feels so good, you know, all the time, and it brings all the joy and the ups and downs and the exhilaration of watching sport into anime, right? And it does it
Hmm.
so well, you know. It's like, yeah, it's the equivalent of watching like Friday
Night
night
lights.
lights,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? With all the good stuff of watching like a proper game at any given
Yeah.
point in time. And I mean, like you've sung the high praises of Haikyuu. I'm really
Mhm.
interested to see the last season because I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah.
Despite Yeah.
This is actually not the last season. It's the second half of season 4. I think they still have plenty of ground to cover for the manga. So I think they should have at least enough material for 2 or 3 more seasons.
Right. Yes. Pardon me. Uh, yeah, it is not the last season yet. Just
Yeah.
double checking. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, like looking forward to that because I haven't caught up
Mm-hmm.
with all of that, despite the fact it's been out for a while
Mm.
on other platforms. But of course, Netflix just makes it so incredibly easy.
Much easier, yeah. I do have to say that if you want to watch it, I would probably recommend other platforms because Netflix does their own subtitles for shows,
Yeah,
and their Japanese translators are not great. I do have to say.
it really depends on the show itself. I do realize, like recently, I've been rewatching some of the older titles that I used to enjoy quite a fair bit.
Mm,
Yeah, it's not great. Which
yeah.
is interesting because like when I was watching a lot of the shows currently, take for example, I was recently been watching like Overlord.
Mm,
And I noticed some discrepancies from certain lines that I really liked in the original.
yeah.
And it felt like it didn't quite translate as well on Netflix. The thing is though, when I was watching it as it was airing, it's all fan subs, right?
Yeah.
And the fan
Yeah.
subs seem to be better, and it's felt that way. So, you can watch on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
You can watch it on Crunchyroll and all your favorite kind of anime streaming sites as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Netflix is incredibly convenient if you
Mm-hmm.
don't mind the subtitling.
Yeah, exactly. I think where Haikyuu sets apart from Yuri and Ice, for example, I feel like Yuri and Ice is more of a character-driven piece about love,
Yeah,
whereas Haikyuu is a more purely sports show.
yeah,
It's. I mean, the characters are really well drawn, but it's purely about sports, like. As in, the characters talk about volleyball.
yeah,
They have no love interest. We don't know anything about anybody's family.
yep, yep,
All they talk about is volleyball, how to get better at volleyball, and part of and that's what I kind of like when I watch sports
yep,
because I don't care about the gossip. I don't care who uh, who this NBA player married or what their family dynamic is like. I
yeah.
care about their skills and what they're doing to improve, and this is pure sports, lah.
Yeah.
Like more like season 3, the entirety of season 3 was one game. It was incredible. It was the finals. It should have been the entire season, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's pure
yeah.
sports lah. Like it's not you. That's what differentiates it from Euro and Ice for
Mm,
me lah.
yeah,
So
for sure.
different strokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The final segment of this month's genre equality is the pull list. This is a segment where either myself or Isa would recommend things that we have read recently, literature either from comics or novels. Yeah, and this month I'm going to be talking about two titles. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about an indie comic called Bitch Planet. Sometime back, I was going through my cupboard
Hmm.
of my old indie comics for an article that I was planning to write on Popwire, and I rediscovered my love for Bitch Planet, which I consider to be the best indie comic of the past decade. Yes,
Mm.
I would rate it slightly above Saga. Um, this comic first launched in 2015. It was created by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Valentine Delandro.
Hmm.
It is set in the near future. This story posits a universe where troublesome women are marked as non compliant and shipped off into a space prison called the Auxiliary Compliance Outpost, more colloquially known as Bitch Planet. Um, it doesn't take much to become non-compliant. Maybe some women have committed murder, then yeah, okay, deserve to be imprisoned. But maybe you're just fat. Uh, so the definition of non-compliance is very undefined and loose. Being seen as non-compliant is something that women aren't in control of. It's just a system for men to get rid of troublesome women.
Hmm.
The prison itself is kind of one part Black Mirror and one part Orange is the New Black. Incarcerated women are stripped naked and greeted by a holographic corseted nun called the Catholic before they are given uniforms. There are also holographic rooms with pornography and crying babies where they're sometimes forced to compete in a brutal blood sport that's like MMA meets rugby. The sport is called Megaton, and it kind of becomes the most popular sporting event on Earth. So they're watching these prisoners play this blood sport called Megaton. Um, so Bitch Planet is kind of like the patriarchy on steroids,
Hmm.
and outside the sci-fi aspect, it's far from unrealistic because there have been plenty of cultures and countries throughout human history that have employed systems such as this to control non-compliant women. And in our reality, most of the inmates are women of color. As is in this reality, slowly we come to realize that all of this insanity is happening because Earth has fallen under the power of an authoritarian group known as the Council of Fathers,
Mhm.
who rule with an iron fist but pretend to be kindly priests like elders. Like Orange is the New Black, Bitch Planet has a large cast of characters whose life stories we learn in flashback form. All of their stories are violent and emotionally engaging, and by the end of it all, readers, I guess, women and men alike, will come to see the term non-compliance as a badge of honor rather than a humiliation.
Mhm.
What's most striking about the comic is the artwork, which looks like pop-up art that you see on those old 60s and 70s exploitation or black exploitation comics slash movies. Like grindhouse style artwork. It evokes the era of those grindhouse films. It's
Yeah.
loud and brash and cheesy. It pops with neon pinks and greens. When combined with its politically sharp storytelling, Bitch Planet does a lot to subversively reclaim the genre for victims of those earlier films, which are women and minorities.
Mhm.
Women and minorities, as the genre implies, are exploited by that genre. In this case, they're celebrated with its deliberately shocking name and over-the-top imagery and scantily clad women fighting in prison. The Conic and the Landro actually managed to tell a surprisingly subtle story about the dangers of political conformity through black exploitation slash exploitation genre.
Mhm.
Make no mistake, Bitch Planet isn't for everyone. It has nudity, it has strong violence, it's offensive in ways that I never imagined, which is saying something. Donick and Delandro aren't shy about killing off characters that you like and rubbing your face in cruelty, and yet it's also hilarious and funny. It's a gripping and action packed and weirdly emotionally realistic. It is the perfect story for a period in history when our real life news headlines are full of violence and sports,
Yeah.
politics and sensationalism, which is why Bitch Comic still, although it's only 5 years old, still stands the test of time. Next up, and finally, I'll be talking about Banned Book Club.
Mhm.
If it's not clear from the title, the graphic novel revolves around a group of young people who meet to read and discuss books banned by the government. It's set in South Korea in the early 1980s, not far removed from the Korean War,
Mhm.
and unlike the weight, and under the weight of a military regime that use censorship and violence to maintain control, a group of students gather in secret to read titles like Pedagogy and The Oppressed and the Feminine Mystique.
Mhm.
At the center of the story is Kim, a young woman caught between the needs of her parents and their small restaurant, which is going under, and her desire for more education and opportunity. This is actually an autobiography. It's a memoir of his author. So this is non-fiction, actually.
Oh.
Um, the lead character slash our author, she meets and befriends the rest of the students in the titular club. She realizes that not only is there a world beyond what she knows, but that the government has been lying to her and everyone else without consequence. Several of Kim's friends are targeted by the government and subjected to surveillance, arrests, beatings, or worse. Um, Even if it were just based on the history of the Fifth Republic and the abuses meted out on the Korean people, Banned Book Club would be a powerful and illuminating read.
Mm.
What makes the book even more potent is its basis in the real life of writer Kim Hyun Sook and her friends. Kim worked with her husband Ryan Estrada on the story and script, relying not just on her memory but also extensive research and interviews. Kim's very real understanding of the dangers and threats in this time period of her country, paired with Estrada's expertise in pacing and comedic beats, have resulted in something quite special. And Ko Hyung-ju's art brings it to vibrant life. The book has a lot in common with manga and feels
Mhm.
far closer to that than traditional American comics.
Yeah.
It's printed in grayscale. The characters are drawn relatively simply, with some features slightly exaggerated. Hyun Suk and her friends are young and enthusiastic, and the expressions Hyung-ju depicts show how, even in the face of all too prevalent danger, they maintain idealistic verve and bravery, it's hard not to feel energized and encouraged by the book's insistence that the world must bend towards justice.
Hmm.
And it ends on a realistic but hopeful note by providing context for current South Korean politics. And of course, free media, free speech, free reading. It's all these things are virtues that are celebrated and championed in a banned book club, as they should be.
Hmm.
And those are my two reading recommendations this month. Let's give you a little preview for what we'll be talking about next month.
Yep.
Man, next month is jam-packed edition. It is Halloween month, of course, so there's a lot of horror-inspired titles out there. But our main topics are going to be Lovecraft Country.
Hmm.
This man, one of the most natural successor to Watchmen on HBO, I think, in terms of theme and in
Hmm.
terms of its deconstruction of genre. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about Mike Flanagan's follow-up to The Haunting of Hill House, called The Haunting of Bly Manor, which debuts on Netflix on in early October. We'll be talking about Primal, the return of Gandhi Tatovsky's latest animated show,
Hmm.
which has no dialogue about the friendship between a caveman and a dinosaur and how they fight off other dinosaurs. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
Um, Isa will be talking about Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, which returns for season 3. Another show returning for season 3 is a spy thriller for kids, Carmen San Diego.
Yep.
Where in the World Is She? She will be on Netflix next month as well. Otherwise, Hellstrom, which is Marvel TV's final and last production, finally going to get aired on Hulu. Doesn't look good, but I'll talk about it anyway. I'll be talking about Welcome to Blumhouse, which is an anthology of 4 films, horror films. It may be hit or miss. I haven't seen any. I'll
Hmm.
talk about it. Lots of other stuff like Monsterland is also another anthology on Hulu. Man, there's so many anthologies. Love and Monsters. South Park is releasing a pandemic special movie on Comedy Central. Um, yeah, too much to talk about. Death in the Family is something I'm looking forward to a lot.
Mm.
Death in the Family, if you don't remember, was an iconic comic book where Robin was killed off via fan voting
Yep.
back in the
By
80s.
a phone voting.
Phone vote, yeah.
Yeah.
People called on the phone to the question was whether Robin should die or not, and the fucking sadistic fans, as we know they can be, chose for Robin to die a horrible gruesome death at the hands of Joker.
By a
Uh,
by quite a bit, right? It was like 70% or something like that.
Oh man, landslide,
Yeah.
landslide. People hated it, Robin. Anyways, Death in the Family will be adapted smartly into a choose your own adventure movie where you can choose whether Robin lives or dies. Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's clever. Like as a premise for choose your own adventure, this is a story that could be done very well. Like you could have a happy ending, you could have the sadistic original ending, whatever you choose.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see how it plays out.
It will see how it plays out, man. Yeah, and anything that like stands out to you for next month.
I'm very excited to talk about Lovecraft Country for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot. I mean, already there's a lot to unpack, but I'm curious where our discussion is going to go once everything's done.
Oh man, yes, definitely. Lovecraft Country is so layered. It's a bit hard to break it down in 15 to 20 minutes, but
Yeah,
we'll try our
yeah.
best. Haunting of Bly Manor, of course,
Mm.
if you listen to us, you know that we are a big fan of Mike Flanagan. We love Doctor Sleep. We
Hmm.
love The Haunting of Hill House. We love Gerald's Game.
Yeah.
And the Haunting anthology, I think, is a great way to continue the franchise without necessarily continuing the story of Hill House.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but just use the same characters and tell a different story.
Oh, I'm just looking forward to see what the shot is going to be if we get
Mm,
that shot, right?
yeah.
Yeah, because like I mean, I'm pretty sure people are going to be looking out for it. I'm curious to like how do you keep it up, right? Especially if you want to do something different.
Mhm.
So yeah, looking forward to that.
Definitely, man. And until next time, this has been Hidzir.
This is Isa.
And yes, you can find us on Mixcloud and on Singapore Community Radio. Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.